we observe Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And it's a culmination of the past 3 weeks. As we know in the teaching of our rabbis, it's not really called the 3 weeks. Even we colloquially, we call it the 3 weeks. In fact, a friend of mine was in a Svarim store, and he walked by, he saw a sefer, Shalosh Shavuos or something. So he figured, it's about those 3 oaths that the Gemara at the end of Ksubis, about the Jewish people made some promises in terms of having to do with the land of Israel, taking over by force. He opened it up, it was about the 3 weeks. So it's 3 weeks now. Even though traditionally it's not, we call it the 3 weeks, but in halacha, in the Svarim, it's known as the Ben HaMitzorim, in between the tragedies. We sandwich Yud Zayin Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and Tisha B'Av, and that's the 3, because technically speaking, it's not really 3 weeks. It's 22 days. But it goes from Tuesday to Tuesday, because it started Monday night, which is a discussion if it did start Monday night, whether the Monday night of Yud Zayin Tammuz, could you get married or not. So Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva where he seems to be lenient on the matter. Rav Soloveitchik was against it. He felt the prohibition of weddings begin right away the night before, because in Judaism, the day begins at night. So, but everyone agrees the fasting doesn't begin to the next morning, but in terms of that. So it goes, so it's called the Ben HaMitzorim. It's in between the 2 tragedies, what happened on the 17th of Tammuz, which we fast on, and then the 9th of Av, which we also fast on. And obviously the 9th of Av begins, it's a 24, 25 hour fast, like Yom Kippur. In fact, the Gemara in Psachim on 54b, Nun Daled Amud Beis, talks about Ein ben Yom Kippur with Tisha B'Av, it was Sveiko Asur, Sveiko Mutter. The Gemara says, the Gemara compares Tisha B'Av with Yom Kippur. So on one hand, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are very similar. Functionally, people almost look at them like they're the same kind of day. Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, they think they're even theologically, fundamentally, functionally they're the same in terms of the prohibitions of not eating, not wearing leather shoes, anointing. But Yom Kippur, in fact, one of the happiest days of the year, that might be next week's topic, about the 2 happiest days of the year is Yom Kippur, and then next week, Tu B'Av, or in 2 weeks, whatever, 10 days, whatever it is, the 15th day of Av. But most people haven't even heard of Tu B'Av, but that'll be maybe next week's discussion. But the point is, Gemara says Yom Kippur is one of the happiest days of the year, and the Rambam writes, it is a day of Simcha, but not Yemei Simcha Yisera, don't overdo it, because the Gemara is referring to the Gemara in Erechin, which talks about the different days of the year we recite Hallel.
So what's the Ein Bain again?
So Ein Bain, so there's no difference between Yom Kippur, even though there is, but there's no difference between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av is El Sveiko, a doubt, because what it means is because Yom Kippur is Dorais, is biblical. So if we have a doubt whether we could eat or whatever the doubt might be over, we have to be strict on. But Tisha B'Av, which is only rabbinical, so that we could be lenient on. Albeit originally it was Midivre Kabbalah. It was in the words of the prophets. In fact, all 4 fast days at one point were equal. In fact, Yom Kippur is the only biblical fast we have. And then we equate the 4 fast days. The Som HaRavi, the fast on the 4th month, last month, Yud Zayin Tammuz. The fast of the 5th month next week, Tisha B'Av. The fast of the 7th month, Som Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia. And Som Atziri, the fast of the 10th month, that is Asar B'Teva. So the Gemara, in the Navi, Zachariah, he equates the 4 fast days, but the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, I think that Yud Ches, Amud Beis, around in the Mishnah, Yud Ches, Amud Aleph, the Gemara quotes from the Navi, it says an apparent contradiction. It calls it Som, which means fast, which is associated with sadness. Som Ravi, Som Chamishi. At the end of the pasuk it says, Yulahem l'sasonu l'simcha, will be a time of joy. So Gemara says, which one is it? You're confusing me. Is the fast day a sad day or is it a happy day? So the Gemara says it depends when. So the Gemara says the following principle. The conclusion of the Gemara is like this, 3 levels. Level number 1 is when the Beis HaMikdash is up, the temple is up, it's a time of shalom, of joy and celebration. When there's no temple and we live under religious persecution, then it's a mandatory fast day. However, the Gemara says, let's say you live in a time where there's no temple and no religious persecution. Let's call it for argument's sake North America. No temple, but no open religious persecution. So the Gemara says, Ratzu misanin, Ratzu einim. The Gemara says, you have a choice. If you want to fast, you can fast. If you don't want to fast, so when it's a temple up, it's a joy, you're obligated to celebrate. When there's no temple and religious persecution, you're obligated to fast and feel the korban, the destruction. However, if there's no temple and no religious persecution, the Gemara says you have an option. So therefore the Gemara says that's true by the other 3 fast days. Yud Zayin Tammuz, Som Gedalia, and Asar B'Tevis. But the Gemara says Shani Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is different than the other 3, even though they start off the same. Why? Shehuchbel Osaros, double trouble. Among other things, both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av, and therefore, because of the terrible intensity of the tragedies that happened on that time, so therefore Tisha B'Av is even mandatory even today. The Gemara's discussion is about sending out messengers. The Gemara said you have to send out messengers for Tisha B'Av, but doesn't say you have to send out messengers for Asar B'Tevis. The Gemara says, why not? Because since it was optional, so that you didn't have to. So the point being is, Tisha B'Av, on one hand, it's similar to the other 4 days, other 3 fast days, but on the other hand, it's stricter. And originally, at the same set, they all started the night before. They all had the 5 prohibitions of the day. But later on, especially today, that it's only optional, so it was too much for the Jewish people to take. 4 Tisha B'Avs, 1 Tisha B'Av's too much for some people, but 4, that's already out of hand, so it was too much, so we did it down to one Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara says Tisha B'Av is different; it's stricter because of what happened. And in fact, so that's a discussion in what it means. What does it mean when the Gemara says Tisha B'Av is different? Does it retain its status from the prophets? Midivrei Kabbalah, the words of the prophets. It has the status of a holiday from the prophets. Well, no, it's still only rabbinical today, but because of what happened, both temples were destroyed. We treat Tisha B'Av stricter, but fundamentally, it's still the same. That's even though it seems like a hypothetical, it's a very important shaila because it has ramifications. But from this Gemara that I just quoted in Psachim 54b, it seems to learn that Tisha B'Av is only midrabanan. We're stricter because of what happened, but fundamentally it's on the same level, and we could be lenient on the doubt. But probably the most relevant question, or at least the one that comes to mind, is eating on Tisha B'Av. I thought you have to fast on Tisha B'Av. Usually you do. But let's say someone is a chole sheyesh bo sakana, and not you have to come on to that, but certainly if someone who's in a life-threatening danger, and by not eating you will die, so there's nothing to talk about. Of course, even on Yom Kippur, you would eat. It's an interesting discussion among the poskim, the commentators, is what. So let's say Yom Kippur, start off with Yom Kippur. Let's say someone's in a life-threatening situation. If they don't eat, they'll die, so they have to eat. How do they have? What manner could they eat? So the Gemara in Yuma tells us about a principle in general, machilan oso kal tchila. That anytime you have to violate a prohibition, even though technically you're not violating because you're allowed to, but all things being equal, you couldn't eat. You should eat in increments. You should eat less. You should eat violating less. So we have a principle: you have to eat a certain amount of food in a certain amount of time. So as long as you eat it and not in that amount, that's what you should do. Machin also kal tchila. You should eat You should eat in increments. So
And that's for chol sheyesh bo sakana, or that's in bo sakana?
No, I'll get to right now. So pashtit, it's a chol sheyesh bo sakana. Someone who on Yom Kippur I'm talking about. Yom Kippur. So many poskim would tell you, drink whatever you just drink. Take a break, eat, take the schnapp, the 1 ounce cups, and whatever the amounts are. Comes along Rav Chaim Soloveitchik and the Briskers, among others, based on a Maggid Mishnah. He says, no way. He says, if someone's life is in danger, don't play around with shiurim. You drink whatever you have to. Drink kedarko, eat kedarko. Don't worry about anything. It's kachol. It's like a weekday. In fact, it's interesting. The Briskers, who are known to be very strict, very machzi. Speaking of what we were talking about before,
They are strict.
Yeah, no, they are not.
Nefesh.
I know. We'll get to that in a second. But the Briskers are people who, at least when they're machmir for good reason. Meaning, there's a discussion among the Rishonim. They have. Well, the chumras have basis. I'm not saying you have to be strict and follow them, but they're not making chumras out of the bull like some other people. But their chumras are basis. I'm not saying you have to be strict for them, but there's validity to the chumras. So in general, they are strict. But there's a famous story with Rav Chaim and maybe the Brisker. I think they say a story with the Rav Soloveitchik, the one from Boston. And when he was a kid, I guess Rav Chaim was there with him, his grandfather. Or maybe it was Rav Moshe. It could happen with his father or his grandfather, and it could have happened to Rav Moshe. And Rav is saying over Rav Moshe Soloveitchik is to Rav's father. So I wasn't sure if it happened to the Rav or the Rav's father, but Rav Chaim was there on Shabbat. I guess someone was sick, and the doctor said I need some light or something, or I want. So Rav Chaim told, I think Rav Moshe maybe told one of the Briskers to turn on the light, and they hesitated, Shabbat, what do you mean turn on the light? Like the case, I think they asked him, do you need the light? Rav Chaim asked the doctor, do you need the light? So the doctor said, it can't hurt or something like that. It wasn't like he demanded it. And then the child or the grandson hesitated, and he really rebuked them about it. And so it's interesting when it comes to pikuach nefesh, life and death issues. So someone said to Rav Chaim, "Why you're always so strict? Why are you so lenient when it comes to this issue?" He says, "What are you talking about? I'm not being lenient on the laws of Shabbos. I'm being strict on the laws of saving life. So of course we're always machmir. You're right, but you got to know what a chumrah is and what a leniency is. So it's interesting that when it comes to these type of things, the Briskers, many of them have leniencies. The general psak of the Shulchan Aruch, and many poskim would tell you if your life-threatening situation, again, if the life-threatening demanded you eat normally, then everyone agrees. But in a case where by eating in increments you won't be, that will be enough. So many poskim would say that on Yom Kippur, as long as eating increments is enough, then you go ahead and you eat increments. Rav Chaim and the Briskers say no, even when a chol sheyesh bo sakana, there's no halach of increments. You eat normally whatever you have to eat, whenever you have to. What about the Gemara? It talks about malchil and kal tchila, eating increments. They said no, that's something else. That's when someone's not in a state of danger. Let's say someone's in a state of he's a chol she'ein bo sakana. You're sick, but you're not in danger. But if I don't do X, Y, or Z, eating or whatever has to be done, in the next hour or 2 or 3, I will become in danger. So that's when they say, in that case, if I'm not in danger now, but by not eating now, I'll become in danger 3 hours, then I have to eat increments. But if I'm in danger right now, don't start asking questions, taking out the shock, just go ahead and drink and eat what you want. So that's by Yom Kippur. So that's the discussion over there. So what about Tisha B'Av? Do the laws of eating with increments, does that apply to Tisha B'Av? So that's actually interesting enough, even though the Machaber brings down, I believe, the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yozdari says we don't worry about Shiurim on Tisha B'Av, but the Binyan Siyah and other poskim are strict even by Tisha B'Av, and they say that you have to eat, they might say even maybe by a chol she'ein bo sakana by Tisha B'Av, but in the case they still say there is a concept of eating increments, and many assume, like me, like the Aruch HaShulchan, that no, there is no shiur on Tisha B'Av. Even in the case, basically, once you're allowed to eat on Tisha B'Av, the only dinner of increment is only on Yom Kippur. That's biblical, that's kares, but Tisha B'Av, there's no dinner of increment. So if a person has, whatever the case may be, if a woman has to eat or whatever the case is, then they can eat normal. That being said, there's a difference between eating normal versus going ahead and bringing out the chips and the, eating tanugim. That's a separate issue. I'm not saying it's usher per se, but that's a separate issue that you should be doing. But in terms of actual eating, the Aruch HaShulchan, among as many others, say that you no increment on Tisha B'Av. Yeah.
Does that have to do with the idea of the chatzi shir? That's the
by Yom Kippur.
Yeah, by Yom Kippur. That whether a chatzi shir is a machlokas, whether that
right,
itself is a drabanan or a right.
Yeah, that could be right.
Drabanan, so therefore you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I would say because what he's referring to is the Gemara in Yuma. So we know that it's prohibited to eat, let's say, a Big Mac. You can't eat treif, and the prohibition to eat a kazaya is a certain amount of non-kosher, so you're liable and liable to lashes, whatever, a good old-fashioned whooping, whatever you want to call it. What happens if one only takes a bite out of the cheeseburger or whatever we're talking about, and that's it? So there's a discussion. The Gemara, let's say you eat less than the amount. So we call it half the shear, but it doesn't mean half. It means anything less than full. As my daughter likes telling me, it's not chatzi halel. It's more like 3/4 of halel. But so again, so in halachic terminology, half means anything less than 100%. That's half. So they point out. So what happens if somebody eats less than the requisite amount of non-kosher? So that's a discussion in the Gemara between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish in the last parak of Gemara Yuma, where they discuss Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Chatzi shir asur min haTorah. It's biblically prohibited to take a bite out of a Big Mac. Even Rabbi Yochanan agrees there's no onish, there's no penalty. If you ate the requisite amount, you violate a biblical prohibition, and if there was a base din, you'd get punished as well. But if you only eat a bite of a Big Mac, so you violate a biblical prohibition, but there's no punishment by base din. So, and Rish Lakish says no, only biblical prohibition is the full amount. Taking a bite or less than the full amount, that's only a rabbinical prohibition. So that's a dispute. So therefore, that's what Lazy is pointing out. So by Yom Kippur, we're even eating chatzi shir is asa min haTorah. So then the question is, right, in terms of how if increments directly fits into that,
you could learn it that
way.
way.
Yeah, I'm saying, it's not exactly the same, but you could write.
Right.
That's why you can also learn the device. It's less than the there. Even according to the right, so the fact that it's not included in others makes it less than the there. So therefore you're supposed to limit the avera. So even if the raisa, even if you hold the regalim,
even if it's a deraisa,
it's less than the avera because it's not ma'anish. If it doesn't have the onish, it's by definition less than the avera.
Because even though it's a deraisa, you still wouldn't have the onish for a chatzi shir. Okay, so you can learn it both ways.
That's right. But that's but what you're saying could tie into it also. But
right. The easy way is to just say that it's a drub. It becomes
right.
We want to learn that it's a deraisa, right? Therefore, if chatzi shir is a deraisa, then you don't want. That's why you want to eat it.
That's by Yom Kippur. You have to eat in increments. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So that's So again, it's a discussion. But so by Yom Kippur, that's where the briskers go about if you're in life-threatening situation, eat what you want, whatever you have to. But if you're in a non-life-threatening situation, but by not eating 2 hours from now, whatever you'll eat, then you have to eat in increments. And by Tisha B'Av, people, that's a discussion. Again, not a chola sheyesh bo sakana perhaps or not, but because really a chola in terms of who's exempt. The Machaber brings the Muberet, the Meineket, the nursing woman.
That definition you said, it always bothers me whenever I hear that. that you're not a Chol She'ez coming now, but if you don't do this in 2-3 hours, you will be.
But you view yourself as a Chol She'ez B'Sakana.
Yeah, I've seen that argument all the time. You take a person who's a diabetic. You don't have to eat right now, but the fact of the matter is he's would you say Chol is a
He's a Chol She'ez B'Sakana.
Yeah, because
does anybody say otherwise?
No,
that's my point.
No,
point
but
is
I think
because he's going to get sick 2 hours.
No, but I think the Nakud is what do we consider, like what would be the definition of someone who's right? It could be that they would agree that is a Chol She'ez, but not every case the fact that like a diabetic could be a Chol She'ez B'Sakana anyway. That's what I'm saying. You're not necessarily arguing on the diabetic
You're
case.
talking about someone in a case where you're not sure it's going to become a Chol She'ez. The diabetic example, he's going to be a Chol She'ez B'Sakana in 2-3 hours, bevadai, right? There's cases that can be that you're not a Chol She'ez B'Sakana, and in fact it's a suffix whether in 2-3 hours you're going to.
That's changing it. That's saying you're saying now that what it's saying is that it might be. So therefore, still even a suffix Chol She'ez B'Sakana has a din of Chol She'ez B'Sakana.
No, you don't. What I'm saying is, I think it's more. I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's just more. I don't necessarily think the briskets would never be. I'm not sure. If they would be cholik on that. Because that's the way you're saying is the way I understood it anyway. Like I thought, like a diabetic would be different. I consider them, because of the vadai versus the suffix part. Because how could you say you're definitely going to become, or else what does that mean? You're definitely going to become in danger.
Yeah, but it's seen as.
Because it's more like, I don't know, right? Because I'm not sure if they say you're basically healthy now. Maybe the difference is healthy now versus going to be a Chol She'ez B'Sakana in 2 hours versus someone who's a Chol already. Maybe there's a distinction also from what stage you are before.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a strange thing. If you're on a path to become, you're a Chol right now. You have a situation that in 3 hours we can predict that this is dangerous for you in 3 hours, right? I can't see why that's not a Chol She'ez.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I think that is.
I know, but I've seen Ramosha make that distinction.
Ramosha made specifically that.
Well, it wasn't about diabetes, but
well, it's not changing anything other than the fact that you just can't eat pachos, right?
The only thing, the issue
or the other way around, that you have to eat pachos. Otherwise, we agree. But just eating then has to be pachos, because right now you're not a Chol She'ez B'Sakana, but you're going to be one. So go ahead, break whatever you need, break the fast.
He's not saying not to eat at all. He's saying it's.
He's not saying, right? He's saying go ahead, but just you're not there yet.
It could be a tactical issue on how, whether that warrants eating in increments or not, in terms of how he viewed whatever the specific shiloh was in terms of that. Yeah.
Which means an interesting definition of the Brisker Shita, because the Brisker Shita also holds that in some way, if you can lessen the Iver, you should lessen the Iver.
Right, well, everyone agrees to that. Everyone agrees to that principle. The question is when you apply it. They're just saying is when we're talking about life and death, there's no time to fool. If you're going to be worried about increments, they're concerned you're going to not take care. You're going to get caught up in the details and not take care of the patient. It's more of more how they, how you deal with the question. But everyone agrees that you always, if you have a choice to do it, to do it one or two ways, right, and they're all things being equal, which are never not, then right, you go with the lesser. Yes, I don't think they disagree with it. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. So in terms of that, so one hand Tisha B'Av has similarities to Yom Kippur. On the other hand, Tisha B'Av is totally different. It's a universal day of Avelis. Different things are prohibited on Tisha B'Av that aren't prohibited on Yom Kippur. For instance, learning Torah, because learning Torah, one of the reasons, because B'kudei Hashem Yisharim Samchei Leiv, we all know the joy of learning Torah, and Tisha B'Av is the day of mourning, so there's a prohibition for a mourner during Shiva not to learn Torah. Sitting on the ground is a din in Avelis. There's a mourner. We don't do that on Yom Kippur. So there's a second aspect of Tisha B'Av, in addition to being the Yom HaTainis, a Tainis Sibor, but there's a Avelis. But in fact, on the comparison, in fact, there's only two places the Rambam discusses the mitzvah of Tosefet. We've discussed in the past there's a mitzvah of, let's say, bringing in Shabbos early, like many people do in the summer, But let me point out, bringing in Shabbos early we do every week. When we light candles 18 minutes before, there's a mitzvah to bring in Shabbos or Yontiv every week, but it's more way now in the summer, people bring in early. So the Rabbi doesn't mention anything about Tosefes Shabbos. The Rabbi doesn't mention Tosefes. The only place the Rabbi mentions Tosefes Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippur, he mentions there's a mitzvah min Torah to bring in Yom Kippur early and extend it afterwards.
That's where the Gemara learns it from.
Yeah, the Gemara, that's the source of the Gemara, right?
I mean, there's no source for Shabbos.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, it is, but the Gemara then from there, they learn out Shabbos and Yontiv, and the Rambam, it's a makol. It's a discussion even in the Gemara itself.
Yom Shabbos.
The Gemara itself goes through back, but the way that we showed them learn the Gemara.
Yom Shabbos.
Yeah. So we paskin that it is Shabbos and Yontiv is biblical also to bring it in. There's only one other place where the Rambam brings up the concept of Tosefes. The Rambam and Perish HaMishnayos in Tainus. You guessed it. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, the Rambam writes there's a mitzvah of Tosefes. So we see the Rambam's equating in that sense the mitzvah, not, one's the right, one's the Rabbanan, but the Rambam talks there's a concept of bringing in Tosefes, Inoy, or whatever you're bringing in, but the concept of bringing in whether it's the Yom HaTainis, by the only two places the Rambam, there's not a din of Kedushas Hayom, because there is none on Tisha B'Av. It has to do with the Yitzhar time. So interesting, those are the only two places. But either way, so there are similarities between Tisha B'Av, and Yom Kippur well, but obviously it's the universal day of Avelis. And in fact, that's what we're observing during this time period, the Churban Abayis.
Why would there be Tosefes for Tisha B'Av? On what basis? I mean, you have a pasuk for Yom Kippur, and then you derive Shabbos from that, right?
Right. No, so the Rambam is so obviously the Rambam's learning the source of Tosefes Yom Kippurim has nothing to do with Kedushas Hayom. He's learning has to do.
Why should there even be a Tosefes? Like, I understand on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur, the Torah tells you, right? So you learn one. How did we make the leap? Like, where did Rambam get this from? That there should be a Tosefes of Tisha B'Av. What's the leap to go from Yom Tov?
No, because he's saying because the Rambam doesn't mention Shabbos and Yom Tov. Rambam only brings it down by Tosefes. He doesn't.
By Yom Kippur, right?
Yeah, he doesn't. But I know, but that's what the Gemara talks. And there's no and Shabbos and Yom Tov. The Rambam learns there is no Tosefes. If you do it, it might be Chal. Right. But there, yeah. So the Rambam, from how the Mefarshim learned the Rambam, is that obviously the Rambam's Tosefes Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Kedushas Hayom, because else why not Shabbos, why not Yom Tov? It has to do with the special. From the pasuk we learn that a special mitzvah, whether it's on a tiny sibor, whatever that definition is, it seems to be a mitzvah bringing it in. So the Rambam who apparently equates Tisha B'Av, because really the only time we daven the Eilah is Yom Kippur. But strictly speaking, the Eilah has nothing to do with Yom Kippur. And any tiny sibor, you're saying the Eilah. Our meaning is today we only do it on Yom Kippur. So really, that's how they, that's how the Rambam seems to be learning, in terms of it, in terms of it's an extension of the fast of the Inoy. That's how he learns the original source of Yom Kippur.
Does it make any sense that there should be a din doraisa of Tosefes on a halacha d'Rabbanan of Tisha B'Av?
No, there's no din doraisa. It's a din d'Rabbanan. Why is it? Yeah.
Is it doraisa?
No,
for Yom Kippur and for Shabbos, it's a doraisa.
I don't know if he says it by Tisha, but not.
That's what I'm asking.
Oh,
so
Ain't doraisa?
No.
What?
No, it's definitely not the Rabbanan. No, it's not the right. It's the Rabbanan.
Right, I was saying, how did you leap from Yom Kippur or Shabbos to so you're saying you just should do it anyway? It's a good idea.
The thing is, when you're saying it's not a din of Kedushas Hayom, therefore that's why Shabbos.
Correct.
It's a din of Inu Hayom. The only other day I can think of that has a full 24-hour yom,
right,
that has Ino, is Tisha B'Av. So when the Rabbanim were guides or Tisha B'Av, they wanted to guides were like the day of
Rabbanim came the right to do, but not that it's definitely not the right. But
yeah, it makes sense. Like,
right. That's what. Okay, and just one last point.
I was wondering about one thing that hit me. You remember the Rabbi makes any distinction the fact that the machlokas of 9 and 10, the issue that the bias was marchiv also on was burning also on the 10th day. Rabbi doesn't mention that aspect, but it tells Cephas to be into the 10th.
Right, in terms of a Tisha B'Av, you mean does he?
Like the idea, we kept to Cephas early, but I'm wondering if
Right. I guess I guess the question what the takana. If it was really Kein Yom Kippur, then there should be, but we do it anyway. If I'm saying we do it through Ben Hashmashas and
right. So the Kein if it's Kein Doris, it could be earlier.
Because even though that's interesting, because the Gemara Psachim talks about because Ben Hashmashas of Tisha B'Av, it's usher to eat, right? I think in Gemara Psachim that the time period between sunset is before sunset is definitely daytime. When the 3 stars come out, it's nighttime. The time period in between is Tosefes, is Ben Hashmashas, is twilight, is doubtful day. So the Gemara quotes over there the Tisha B'Av, it's also to eat Ben Hashmashas. So that's the whole discussion. That's why which leads some Rishonim to say, but Ben Hashmashas of Yud Zayin Tammuz, Asar B'Tevet, it's mutter. And that's why even the Aruch HaShulchan writes, don't be mocha, don't protest someone who eats after Shkia, because really is what to rely on. But by Tisha B'Av it's clear. So that's a discuss. So depending how you learn, so some people learn. So the simple pshat is talking about the Ben Hashmashas after Tisha B'Av, but some want to say no, it's only talking about the Ben Hashmashas. It's a discussion among the which one it should be. But I'm saying this one last point is a famous thing from Selevan about, as we said, that the Avelis gets, we know that Rav Selevan said that the 3 weeks is equivalent to the 12 months, the 9 days is equal to Shloshim, and Tisha B'Av is equal to Shiva. But it's just in the inverse order. Usually we do Shiva, Shloshim, Yud Beis Chodesh. So based on the Gemara in Yerbamis, he explains the difference between either you could public mourning versus private mourning, or new mourning versus old mourning, however you want to phrase it. But Rav Selevan says, why is it the opposite? Because when you lose a loved one, a real person, so when are you going to feel it most? Right away. It's the intensity. You're going to react, and in turn, and then hopefully time heals. 7 days you got to stay in your house. Okay, leave, go back to work, but try to get back to the new. And then for a period, Yud Beis Chodesh. But it comes to crying over the Churban Habayis. We're lucky if we get, any tears in. So to wake up one day, okay, Tisha B'Av, let's start crying over the destruction. It's not going to work. So you need 3 weeks, let's start getting into the mood, no weddings, no haircuts, etc. To 9 days, meat and wine, etc. And then hopefully, by Tisha B'Av, we get, we at least start getting into that, we're close to at least getting into that mood. So he points out that it's very interesting to note, because as we have to mention, the Gemara in Tainus, which says that really, and everyone agrees to this, the majority of the temple was destroyed on the 10th of Av. On the 10th day. It started burning on the 9th of Av. So that's the Gemara. And then so why do we, and one of the rabbis, Rabbi Yochanan, someone said, or if I would have been around, I would have picked the 10th of Av as the day too. So why do we pick the 9th? The Gemara says, the beginning of the tragedy is always the worst, so we pick the beginning. But everyone agrees that based on the majority, so the Rav Selevan asked an obvious question. He says, as the day of Yom Kippur goes on, do the Hugei Avelis, do the acts of mourning we do, lighten up or get stricter as the day goes on? So we all know, when it comes to Chatzos, midday, so we sit on chairs, we put on talis and tefillin in the afternoon, we say Tiskabel Svas, and the different things we add. We lighten up on the Avelis. So the Rav Selevan, yes, what's going on is we got it all wrong. It should be, that's just when the Beis HaMikdash started burning after Chatzos and Tisha. That's when we should be getting the strictest and moving up. Why is it the other way? So Rav Selevan explained based on a Medrash, Tosas, and Kedushin quote that Mizmar Liasaf, that David said. So the Medrash says Mizmor. We were talking about the destruction of the temple, and David uses the language of Mizmor, a song, a happy song. So the Medrash says Kina, it should be a lamentation for David, a lamentation. So what is the Gemara? So the Medrash goes on to say, because everything, as bad as the destruction of the temple is, there aren't that many things worse than that, but there is one thing worse. The destruction of Klal Yisrael. So what's worse, the destroying eitz va'avanim, wood and stones? You can destroy the temple, you can always rebuild the temple. But what was the danger? Klal Yisrael didn't know were they going to make it. God was very angry, and apparently there was a point where he was thinking of destroying Klal Yisrael, whatever that means exactly. But he was thinking of destroying Klal Yisrael. And therefore they were very worried. And what happened when the Beis HaMikdash started burning, a kind of ironic sigh of relief. Thank God it's the building and not me, and I'm not in the building. You go by, your house is on fire. So kind of like it's ironic, but in a sense is that. So after they realized it wasn't them anymore, so there was a lightening up because, okay, it's a terrible thing, Churban Habayis, and we have to mourn, but we don't have to, we're still going to make it, God forgave us, we'll have to do tshuva and all that, and that's why the Nehugei Avelis, even though they get harder and harder, 3 weeks, 9 days, the week of Tisha B'Av itself, but after Chatzos, that's the ironic turning point where, on one hand, you would think it'd be stricter, but no, that since it's a sigh of relief, that thank God it was the temple and not us, so therefore we light up our mourning. Again, most of them, people think it's over after Chatzos also, they'll make that mistake. The halachas basically all apply, except for those certain halachas of sitting on a chair, putting on your towels and doing all that, and tiskabels, because it's a day of sasam tefillah, so we don't do tiskabel in the morning. But afterwards, the basic laws of Avela still apply. But there is room. That's why in terms of whether someone has to go to work or is going to. So it's always, if you have to, whatever has to, I'll let you can decide what has to mean. But whatever has to means, if you have to, so you should, if you can, you should always, if you could do it after Chatzos, it's always better. But there is something about the Chatzos part in terms of that, lines up, a drop in terms of that.